It only took a month, but I got it. My new controller. Got a bigger controller for this bike here to make it faster. And like I said in my last video, how to tune your e-bike like a pro, you need to watch that. Don't just go and willy-nilly throw a controller on there to make your bike faster. You may not need it. Your motor may not can handle it. Your battery may not can handle it. But in that video, I determined that this controller was my weakest link. I can upgrade it. So right now, I've got the perfect bike. I think like IMHO said, he said even a blind man can tune this bike, and he's right. I've got a controller that I can run to 450 line amps, and I really can't exceed my motor or my battery, and it's the perfect bike. But like everything, I'm gonna ruin it. I just can't leave something well enough alone. So in the interest of messing this bike up, I determined that in my last test that I wasn't overheating my motor. That's your motor limitation, is heat. I wasn't overheating or drooping my battery beyond its limitations. And again, watch that video. For this 96 volt battery, that maximum droop would have been 13 volts. I wasn't hitting that sag. The temperature limits I want to be careful of. I don't want to exceed 60 degrees. That's where I have it set to protect at by the BMS. So I don't want to see any more than 50, 55 degrees. I wasn't getting that. On the rear wheel, that's your call. Think 140 to 160 degrees Celsius. Somewhere in there should be your limit. BMS has a MOSFET limit also. I've got that at 80 degrees, and that was from the factory. Then the controller also has MOSFETs. Those, the Fardriver app sets at 100 degrees max and then resets at 80. So think 80 degrees for that also. I think I can safely go to a bigger controller without having a big old Chinese battery fire between my legs. Currently I've got a ND961200, line amps 450 max, 1000 amps phase max, 96 volts. This one has an internal Bluetooth. The one I got has an external Bluetooth. It would be really nice if I could just unplug all my nice wiring here that I've done. I've got it all going to the right buttons and switches and throttles and things like that, and the display. And it would be really cool if I could just take this off, put my new controller in there, and plug that into it. I might cannot. There's a version 1 and a version 2 of these things. This is the version 2. I know that, but how do you know that? The only thing I can find in common is the version 2 has this little cover on it that you take off. If you look at a version 1 controller, this off, everything's open, there's no covers on it. So this plug here is not compatible with that one because quite a few of the pinouts are different. Over here, the brown wire is a boost wire. The blue wire is your One-Lin or one-line connector for the DKD display. But you go to this version 2 and the DKD display is running off the brown wire. There is no boost wire on this thing. You have to assign it via the app. And I'm bringing up the boost wire. You move up to a version 2 controller, the boost is a little bit difficult because you've just used what we thought was the boost line, the brown wire, to run your DKD display. So what we're going to have to do is assign another one of these pins to be your boost. On the version 1, it already assigns the brown wire. On this version 2, it does not have a pin assigned to boost. And that's what's confusing a lot of people. So if we go into Pro, down to Functions, here's your boost pin. Mine is invalid, but it has all these choices here. Pin 8, pin 9, things like that I can select from. Cruise control is pin 17, reverse is pin 8, boost on a version 1 is pin 6. So there's all sorts of good options to use, but you have to figure out one you're not using, or one you can spare. I've got this reverse switch. It's not that important. I could just reassign this reverse switch to be my boost on this version 2 here. And here's how I would do it. I would go to the backwards pin. It's set on pin 8 right now. Number 4, pin 8. I would make this invalid. Get rid of it altogether. Now that's invalid. Now I go over here to boost pin and I make my boost number 4, pin 8. There it is. Now I'm not going to have this problem because I'm putting on the version 1 controller that has a boost switch. But if you're moving up to a version 2 controller, this is what you got to deal with. So this 1200 phase amp controller, 600 amp line amp, 1200 amp phase. It also has 60 MOSFETs. It's an S60. What are MOSFETs? Well, you can watch a video on them, or you can try to get laid instead. I'd go with the latter. They're basically switches that can vary voltage. It connects the line source, which is your line current, to the drain source, which is your phase current. This is the exact same size and body and version type as my 1800 that I got that didn't work. So hopefully this one works. I got the new controller installed, ND961200. In the process, I blew up the 1000. We'll address that in another video. Now, since this is a version 1, the DKD display is hooked up to the light blue wire down here, not the brown wire. The brown wire is boost. I have my own dedicated wire for that. I just got it taped off here. I'm not going to hook it up just yet. I'm going to get this thing rolling first and then do the boost, like it was an afterthought. Get everything hooked up, and now we're back to the beginning. Turn it on. Get the beeps, should be 7 beeps, meaning the temperature sensor's off. So you can watch the first videos on how to do that, but I'm gonna Bluetooth to this, set the temperature sensor, set it up, do an Autolearn, just like if I started brand new. KTY 83122, I think. Let's try that one. Now, it's ready for the Autolearn. That's what those beeps mean. There's a few things the Autolearn will not detect. Let's go to Pro. It has no idea how many pole pairs we have, and we have 16. We know that, and that's a hub motor. It's gonna have 16. It has no idea what the rated power of my hub motor is. I can put in 20,000 watts. It's gonna tell me the RPM, the rated speed of my hub motor, and I'm gonna use that. It knows I'm 96 volts, it doesn't know the max speed. It's gonna go ahead and assign me maximum line current and phase current. And for this, I need to know what I have in my BMS. I don't want to just crank off with those maximums. When we left off with the 450 controller, I had 450 and I had 1000. So we'll go ahead and put those in there. And then we'll move those up as we adjust the BMS. And that's really all we have to worry about before we do the Autolearn. We'll save that. We'll run the Autolearn. Enter self-learning status. So now we're beeping. We're going to go full throttle. We're going to hold it. It's going to reverse. You can see my speedometer's all off. Everything's off. I'm basically starting from scratch here with this bike. We got the X, we got the throttle error, that's normal. Let it come to a complete stop. There's the beeps, release the throttle. Now I've got the green check, it just happens. The error code goes away. So with a bigger controller, we're gonna push more line amps and try to go faster, obviously. That's the goal. We need to make some changes to our limitations in the Fardriver app as well as the BMS app. Let me hook to it here, Bluetooth. They told me I was good for 400 amps continuous and 640 amps peak for 10 seconds. And we know those were false. Those were just ballpark. From the last video on how to tune your e-bike, we figured out that we actually have a max continuous of 320 amps on this battery here, not 400. And as far as peak goes, we know we're just limited by a 0.5 volt per cell drop, or 13 volts overall, or 60 degrees cell temperature, whichever comes first. That's going to be our limitation for peak amps. And if you didn't watch the video on how to tune your e-bike, I tell all about why we know that. So be sure and watch that so you know what I'm talking about here. I also know from that last video that whatever amps I assign the line amps in the Fardriver app, let's say I assign it 600, I know it's going to spike and go over that. And it could go as high as 50 amps over. So I have to be cognizant of that too. You go to the parameters. My temp parameters I'm not going to change. That's protecting the battery. 60 degrees, high temp for the battery. 80 degrees for the MOSFETs. We'll go to current parameters, and I've got 320 set for continuous maximum amps. I'm not going to change that. What if I'm going up a hill like Pikes Peak and I'm going up it forever? I don't want to exceed 320 the whole time. Otherwise I'll overheat these batteries. But when I do exceed 320 to get into my peak amps, I do want to go over what I have here at 445. That's what I had in for the 450 controller. And I know I'm going to spike a little bit. So I'm just making this up. I'm going to go to 620. And then I want to do that for probably, they say 10 seconds. I can go to 640. But I really don't need more than about 8 seconds to do an 1/8 mile. I'm going to put an 8-second limit in there. So that means I will go over 320 for 8 seconds, but not over 620. Now the problem is, I've got the short circuit protect up at 450 amps. I need to have that a lot higher. So I'm going to run that to like 650. And there we are. 620 for 8 seconds I can go. And I can hit 650 spike for a millisecond. We'll turn the bike on. We'll connect to the Fardriver app. I've already went through and put all the settings in there I want, like turned a lot of this stuff off. Got it set like I like. I already got my speedometer accurate. I got the amps meter showing at 1000, so this should be 100 amps, 200 amps, all the way up. I should get it to 600 amps on the scale up here. I show how to do all that on the Fardriver manual video I made. I've got an accurate speedometer. I want that because I don't want to have to keep another app open on here. I'm going to have the Fardriver app open. I'm going to have the BMS app open. I don't want to have a speedometer app open, so I've got it on here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this thing to about 85, 90 miles an hour, and that's how I know my 8th mile will be complete, and then I can let off the throttle. I've got the draggy mounted down here. It's hard to keep track of when you hit the 8th mile and quarter mile. They tick off as you're racing, but it's hard to notice them when you're focused on going down the road. So max line current, I've got it 600. I'm gonna go ahead and just max it out. 600, 1200 for the phase. That's what the controller will give me. And then of course gear 3 will be open, maximum that this will give me on the controller, 600 and 1200. I'm using 2000 RPM as a max. I don't need to go faster than that. That's what did I figure out, 130 something miles an hour. Ratios and speed, we're gonna put everything at 100. I know what I said last time, but this is not for the drag race. This is just to test something. We wanna know what RPM the weak light comes on so we can see where the EMF equals back EMF, if you remember my tuning video, so we can know where to start limiting amps to increase volts and make EMF greater than back EMF to increase RPM. We also wanna know where voltage sag starts below our maximum sag, and for me that's going to be 13 volts. If you have a 72 volt system, it would be 10 volts. So we can start tapering off the amps based on wheel RPM. So I'm going to start with 100% and everything, and that's just for the initial test run, not even a timed run. So this is my starting point. We'll go out and run it. We're going to check for voltage sag, then we're going to check for heat in the battery, and we're going to check for heat on the MOSFETs to see if we can run this much current. We don't even care about times on these first runs. We're just going to look at heat. We're going to see if we can actually run these things for 8 seconds. 8 seconds is about my 8th mile right now, so if I can run it for 8 seconds without dumping below 13 volts, and I'll be checking that on the graph page right here. I'm at 107.7. If I can run that without dumping below 13 volts, and if I can run it on the BMS, you open that up. I'll be watching my temperatures here. If I can run it without exceeding, I'm going to probably use 60 on the MOS and 55 for the cells. There's 26 units in here, and they've got temperature probes on 4 of them, and I'll be using these to not go over 55. And if I can't, I'll have to limit the amps or limit the time I'm pulling those amps. Okay, I'm in gear 3. I've got the map page up. We'll do a volt check here. And I can just do this as a roll-on. I can come off the throttle, volt check 107.2, and then hit it. There's about 90 miles an hour. That should give us a good recording. Now I want to go see what my battery's doing. 33 degrees, yeah, they're not hot at all. 42 degrees. Okay, let's break it down. Start with 107.2 volts and we take off. Full throttle. I still haven't even reached 600 line amps. 350 RPM. We keep coming up. 600, 700, 800 RPM. Right about here at 1000 RPM, I'm 0.1 volts below. This is where I start a sag below 13 volts. Anything below 94.2 is below 13 volts. So I've got several options here. I can limit the line amps from 600 down to control that sag. As you see, I come up more. We get to 1125, sagging more, 93.5. To 1300 RPM, you can see I've sagged down 13.8 volts, and I'm pulling 599 line amps. If I limit my line amps, I'm going to also limit the bike up to this 1200, 1300 RPM point, but it will work. I would have to do the math from where I started sagging at about 572 line amps. I would need to probably limit it at around 550, and that's just a guess. I would have to put that in and test it, but it kills that 0 RPM to 1000 RPM range. It's going to take 50 amps off of that that's available. Now the easy solution here, and this is where you want to use the boost switch, I could limit the line amps to 550 and I wouldn't sag, at least during this portion. When we get to the week, we're probably going to see more sag, but for right now, I could limit it to 550, and then I could use a boost switch. I would have to see what my time is from 0 to 1000 RPM, and it's about 3 seconds. So I could set my boost switch to 600 amps for that 3 seconds. Hit the boost and take off on boost. Once the 3 seconds expires, it'll drop down to 550 amps. And that would be a good solution. I could also limit my phase amps starting at 1000, somewhere right in here. You see when I get to about 1250 here on the RPM, phase amps are at 554. So if I want to limit with phase amps, I've got to go to ratios in speed, and I've got to lower the percent of phase amps that's available. 1200 divided by 554 is 46%. I want to be less than 46%. So by 1200 RPM, I want to be around 40%. Again, making that up. We'd have to test it after we do it. Then I could step it back down. It looks like the steps are 1250 RPM. I could put 40% in there, put 50% at 1125, put 60% at 1000, put 70% at 875, 80% at 750, and 90% at 625. You might think I'm limiting power in the lower RPMs, but if we go back and look at them, let's take an example, 500 RPM. And you can see I'm only pulling 622 phase amps. So even at 500 RPM, I don't need 100% phase amps in ratio and speed. I can get away with almost half here, probably 52 or 3%. So it's not going to hurt me to limit these things in ratio and speeds, even down to lower RPMs, but it will hurt me to limit the line amps. So we said 70% on 875 RPM. Let's go look at 875. There's 879, and it's still 622. 622 divided by 1200, that's 51%. I could go all the way down to 51% and not limit myself at 875 RPM, but we're going to only go to 70%. So we shouldn't be limiting ourselves by doing this. The next event we want to look for is where field weakening starts. And this test is done, remember, with everything in ratio and speeds at 100%. Keep coming up right there. 1432, weak. Now we have back EMF exceeding or equal to EMF. And when that happens, the controller is going to enter field weakening and limit phase amps. And you see they drop down to 457. They limit it by lowering line amps. You can see line amps are down to 491. And look what happened to the volts. It came up above the 13 volt sag, 94.3. So we're actually good, but we're not good for long. It's going to sag pretty strong starting after this. If I bring it up to 1625, dumps down to 93.2. So right in there, we're talking about a 15 volt sag. So we want to correct that. And that's one of our options on ratio and speeds. We want to have a limit in there. And 2 volts is 15% of 13 volts. That would be about 60 amps less. We want to get the phase amps down to about 346 right there at that RPM. And 346 is 28% of 1200. So at 1625, we would want 28% or less. If we taper that down from where we started, we were at 1250 with 40%, and we can bring it down 1375, 35%. 1520 at 30%, and we can keep coming down. Then we bring it down to 1625 RPM, where we want the 28%, and we'll be at 25%. So a little bit less, that'd be good. And then we'll keep tapering it down, 20%, 15%, 10%, and 0. I don't want to go above 2000 RPM. So that's how we're going to build our ratio and speeds to not limit us, but keep us from sagging.
Take a look at the original run here. You see how long it takes me to get to my 600 line amps. It's coming on real slow. I don't really get to 600 until I hit about 1000 RPM. And the issue there is I've got my throttle ACC steps too low. So I'm going to go in here and look at those. I had them at 180. I need to change those to 224, I think is max. And I want to see if I can get my line amps higher to increase that 0 to 60. Because on the graph page now, I want to test and see what that 224 does to me from 0 RPM to 1000 RPM. That should be a 0 to 60. I should have hit 1000 RPM in there. I just want to kind of find out where I'm at on that throttle steps. This is with 224 in there. I'm gonna just do a 0 to 60 and see if I get anything better after adjusting those throttle steps. Yeah, 4.26 seconds. I mean, that is better. It did help some. We'll go with that. I made all those parameter changes to ratios in speed. We're going to go out and do a run. Let's look at a couple of issues. So one is I made that limit for 8 seconds in the BMS. Now you'll see on the speed on this thing, I'm actually hitting 1000 feet. I'm actually hitting before the quarter mile at a higher speed and fast. But look at that 8th mile. I'm still running 8 seconds. The bike shut down on me. It's because I set 8 seconds for my limit to be over 320. I thought it would just revert back to 320, but it didn't. It actually self-protected, shut the battery off, the bike died. So I'm going to go into the BMS because I'm holding the bike open too long. I'm going to bump that up to 15 seconds. I'm going to keep a real good eye on my temperatures, on my battery, and everything else to make sure I don't exceed anything. And I'm also going to do something a little wacky here. I'm going to bump up that 620 to 640 in case I spike, which I'm not spiking. And then I'm also going to bump up my protect to 800 amps, and that seems like a lot. It's obviously more than I want to pull, but for this portion of the test, while I do this, I'm just going to use the Fardriver to protect my battery, kind of backwards. The Fardriver should not let the motor pull over 600 amps, I think I put in there. So even though I have 800 in there, I'm just wanting to make sure I'm not hitting that protect, and that's not why I'm shutting down. And then I'll go and move that 800 back down after I complete the test. Done a couple of pulls on it to check my sag. It looks like the adjustments I put in to the ratios and speed work. Not finely tuned. I'm still drooping below at some points, but this is like tuning a carburetor. This could be a year-long project, but it's close enough. Don't need to show all those runs. So I've got the ratios and speed set pretty good for now. I've bumped the BMS up so I won't hit that 8-second limit. The temperature is holding good on everything, motor, controller, and battery, so that's not a worry. So do another run on it here and on the draggy. It looks like I showed a pretty good improvement there, 12.92, so that's below 13 seconds, barely, but that counts, and that's definitely an improvement. I'm gonna get from a 1/8 here, 8.1, yeah, kind of an improvement. I mean, I'm not really a good drag racer or taker offer guy. I don't know, I'm just standing there then giving it the throttle. And then 430, 0 to 60, I think that is an improvement. I think I got 4.22 yesterday, and that's probably just all technique, but the quarter mile definitely improved. 98 miles an hour, 12.92, and the 8th mile, 8.15, and 87 miles an hour. So yeah, the 600 controller is definitely an improvement. It's had a little time to heat soak. I'd like to go back and check my temperatures now. Yeah, so 47 degrees on the motor, that's nothing. 37 degrees on the controller, that's nothing. Yeah, 30 degrees, 32, these are nothing temperatures, so I could definitely probably even step my controller up again. I'm not even tasking this thing. My motor's asleep back there saying, use me. My battery's being used, but not to the max. I got more in there. Yeah, I could definitely go up on the amps. Might have to get a larger controller.